The Marquis de Lafayette, born into the French nobility, beloved patriot of the American Revolution, devoted friend of our founding fathers, honorary American citizen, instrumental in the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown, who in February of 1825 enjoyed the very best hospitality Suffolk, Virginia had to offer. In this episode of Suffolk History in a Nutshell, Frank and Gloria Womble help us retrace Lafayette's steps during his two-day stay 200 years ago in our historic town. I'm Lisa Amos, and welcome to Suffolk History in a Nutshell. I was born and raised in Suffolk, Virginia, and it's still my home today. Join me as we explore this historic city and uncover the stories of its charming people and places. So we're going to talk about Lafayette here in Suffolk, but let's talk a little bit about how he even became such a beloved figure in American history. We all know a little bit about, I think, the Revolutionary War. He was, of course, French. He grew up in a very wealthy, aristocratic family. And he becomes very interested in the American cause. How did that come to be?
Well, he was very idealistic. And during summer training in France, at a dinner party, he met the Duke of Gloucester, George III's brother.
How ironic.
It is ironic. And the Duke was brave enough to criticize his brother and express empathy for the American colonists. And so Lafayette in his memoir said, "And my heart was captured at that moment."
So he finances his own trip over the ocean to the colonies, and he's very young, Gloria. How old is he?
He was only 19 years old at that point in time.
He was a junior captain in his dragoon unit in France. He came to the United States, and the Congress awarded him a commission as a two-star general. They thought it would be honorary. Lafayette had other ideas. He wanted the honor and the glory of leading troops into combat, American troops. And he did on several occasions, was wounded at the Battle of Brandywine, and soldiers under his command had a major role in the successful siege of Yorktown, the last major battle of the American Revolution.
And during this time, he befriends some of our founding fathers.
He certainly did. He was a close friend with George Washington. He called Washington my paternal friend. He was also good friends with Alexander Hamilton, who at the time Lafayette began as one of Washington's aides de camp, and so was Hamilton.
And then in 1824, years after the war, he receives a very interesting invitation.
He did indeed. President James Monroe invited Lafayette to return to the United States as the guest of the nation.
What was the country like in 1824?
There had been a financial crisis in 1819 that had lasted for 3 years. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 was only a Band-Aid solution at best to the question of the expansion of slavery. And the divisive 1824 presidential election, said by historians to be the most divisive in the nation's history. Lafayette, however, was a neutral, heroic figure, and he managed to calm the sectional rivalries because he was here when those election results were announced.
So there were definite reasons behind inviting this particular figure, this beloved figure, to come back to America. What do you think they were hoping to accomplish?
Well, he was the last major general, living major general from the Revolutionary War, because he was so young when he first came here. And so people clamored. They wanted to see him. Everywhere he went, the people turned out in droves. And whether it was a big city or a small town, they were excited about him being there.
He was a unifying figure.
Indeed.
In a time that was very much needed.
That's correct.
All right, so Lafayette comes back to America. He's quite a bit older.
That's right.
How old is he at this point?
67.
He's 67 years old. This actually wasn't his first time in this area. He was in what was then Nansemond County.
That's correct.
During the war. Tell us a little bit about that.
He was here, camped out near Sleepy Hole, probably about where the Sleepy Hole golf course is today, at the start of what became known as the Virginia Campaign in 1781. Washington had ordered Lafayette here. His first mission was to attempt to capture Benedict Arnold and execute him in the most summary manner possible, according to Washington's orders. That did not work because Lafayette arrived here. There was insufficient ammunition in the camp. Benedict Arnold was in a strong defensive position in Portsmouth, and that mission went away. However, that was the start of the process that culminated at Yorktown.
And how many states were there at this time?
24.
24 states. He's going to try to visit as many states as he can. I believe he visits all of them.
He visited all 24.
And he had something to say about Suffolk. What did he have to say about
He
Suffolk?
said he was very concerned about Suffolk and the trials and tribulations they had experienced during the war. The British burned Suffolk in 1779. So it had been a rough time here.
Let's go back and retrace his steps. So he first stops in what is now Driver. And
Correct.
tell us where he stops there.
He stopped there at Tony Pugh's Tavern. Tony Pugh was a free black man who ran a popular tavern there. And he was met there by the Suffolk the official welcoming party. And they were joined by, as they approached the town, joined by a group of citizens and the Suffolk Columbians, a ceremonial unit that marched to a nice parade right here into town.
But he's going to come from a southern direction.
Right, from that way.
Right up what we call Main Street now.
Correct.
And stops at the Castle Inn, and we'll talk about that too in a minute.
Sure.
And is going to be the guest of honor at this wonderful banquet. And Gloria, the Suffolk ladies must have been, I would be a little bit in panic mode. What are they trying to get together for this banquet that's going to be on this site? And I should let everybody know this particular building that Lafayette entered burned down.
Great Fire of 1837.
1837. This building is from 1839, but this was the site where
Correct.
he was. So tell us what kind of went into preparing. What did they have that we know they had at this banquet? It was on the second floor of this building.
Correct. The banquet itself was actually catered by a Mr. Holliday, who his establishment was right across the street.
So right over here.
Yes. So he provided the food and drink that evening.
I don't think people realize this was just the men who were invited.
That's right.
How many people came?
Well, they believe that there were 80 men that came here. Afterwards, he would go to where he was staying and receive the ladies.
Frank, who was in charge of organizing this event?
Well, Mills Riddick, a local lumber dealer, was the president of the Committee of Arrangements. He had a home directly across the street here where Riddick's Folly is today. That also burned in the Great Fire of 1837.
We know a little bit about the toasts that were offered that
Yes.
evening. How many were there?
The tradition was 13.
So this happened on February the
25th.
25th.
Yes.
We're filming in January, so 200 years ago on this spot.
Yes, we're very much looking forward to celebrating Lafayette's return.
When Lafayette visited Suffolk, this is the first place he stopped. We're standing at what was then known as the Castle Inn, the location of the Castle Inn. What do we know about this particular place?
Well, it was a popular inn here on the very main street of Suffolk. It was built in 1789, and it burned in the Great Fire of 1837. So the building is long gone. So he checked in here at the Castle Inn. I assess it was probably mid-afternoon. The dinner was announced at 6, and the party retired to the courthouse for the banquet. They returned here, and Lafayette received the ladies until around 11 p.m. He retired to bed, and the rest of the populace of Suffolk continued to party all night long at the inns and taverns of Suffolk.
Gloria, I think the ladies of the town made sure to collect all their best things for the most comfortable stay he could possibly have.
Absolutely. I mean, it went down to what beds he slept on. They brought quilts from home, their finest china. I bet some people in Suffolk still might have something in their closet or in their china cabinet that he used when he was here.
So after he leaves here, he gets up the next day and he's headed towards his next location, which is going to be...
He was headed to his next location, as you said, which was Somerton. His destination was Murfreesboro, North Carolina.
So he takes the road out of Suffolk, I believe it's now Saratoga Street, and he heads south. So we are here at the southernmost Suffolk location of Lafayette's tour in Somerton. and he's headed to North Carolina, and he stops here. Tell us a little bit about this location.
Well, this is the Washington Smith Ordinary, directly behind us here. It was built around 1800, and it is the only building still standing in Suffolk that Lafayette actually visited. And so the three-man delegation from Murfreesboro, who was on horseback, traveling north to find Lafayette literally, ran into him and his party and a group of men from Suffolk who had all traveled down with Lafayette about 4 miles from here near Whaleyville. And they retired here to the Ordinary and had a wonderful meal. It's got quite a charming building and, of course, historically significant. And it is the oldest building standing here in the Somerton Historic District, which is now on the National Historic Register.
Did he write about his time here? Do we have any record of what he thought of it?
We actually do. We have a number of important primary source documents. One of the most important is a book written by Lafayette's secretary, Auguste Levasseur, who accompanied him on the tour and wrote a book called Lafayette in America in 1824 and 1825, Journal of a Voyage to the United States. Local newspapers also covered his visit in detail, including the Norfolk and Portsmouth Herald, which published an account of his visit here to Suffolk, including verbatim the 13 toasts offered at the banquet that night.
One of the interesting kind of spin-offs from this whole tour was the souvenir industry. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was kind of like the Beatles coming to the United States. Everybody wants a piece of them or something to remember the visit by. And that is exactly what happened with Lafayette. Everybody wanted something. So there was china made. They made quilts for their beds that had Lafayette on them. They had ladies' gloves that had Lafayette on them.
One last question for you all. Why is it important, besides just being a history buff, but why is it important that we remember Lafayette?
Lafayette was crucial to winning the war. Had it not been for the support of the French government, we literally would not have won that war. They were also critical to the victory at Yorktown. 6,000 French soldiers and a French fleet blockaded, along with Washington's troops and Lafayette's troops, and blockaded Cornwallis there. He could not be reinforced or evacuated. And that resulted in our victory and guaranteed our independence.
He promoted freedom for women. He promoted women's rights. He did not believe in slavery. He was an abolitionist. And so he was promoting rights for the enslaved and also religious freedom.
Lafayette spent his entire adult life pursuing three things: liberty, equality, and what he called natural rights, what we call universal human rights. And we see that struggle continuing today.
Well, thank you all so much for your part in remembering and bringing this back to life, and we look forward to celebrating the 200th anniversary of his visit to Suffolk.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you there.